Hello there, duelists. Today we'll be using the Force to build our deck, with Kozmo on the playmat. An awesome combination of Yu-Gi-Oh!, Star Wars and the Wizard of Oz, Kozmo have a really interesting design in my opinion, and one that still holds up today. Released in Clash of Rebellions as a TCG exclusive, Kozmo didn't really make too many waves until Dark Destroyer was released, at which the time a lot of decks had real trouble dealing with the non-target and pop. Enough for Destroyer to be limited for 2 years. But Kozmo just couldn't get back to lightspeed when it's finally released. So in the modern game, Kozmo have had to play control. Help me, Obi-Wan Controlly, you're my only hope. Okay, and we'll meet our pilots and ships. So, first up, we're running 3 Kozmo Tincan. So this is kind of like the cornerstone of the deck. It's kind of where all of your plays kind of start from. All of the Kozmo cards have, well, the lower ones are psychic type monsters, and they're the pilots, and they can tag out or banish themselves in order to summon a Kozmo monster that's a level higher than they are. They've also got another effect where they pay life points in order to activate an effect. So Tincan in the end phase, pay 500, reveal 3 cards, your opponent picks 1, the rest goes to the graveyard. So he's the way of getting the ball rolling. It's a bit slower than it has been in the past, just because, you know, end phase is a long time to wait, but he's still a great starter. From there, we're playing a few other ones. So 1 Strawman, 1 Farmgirl, and 1 Soartroopers. So these have all got the tag out. Obviously, you know, Strawman can tag out for level 3 and above, Farmgirl can tag out for level 4 and above, etc, etc. Farmgirl was kind of like the original play starter. If it inflicts battle damage, pay 500, and you can add a Kozmo card from your deck to your hand, which is great, but super slow now. Inflicting battle damage with her is, well, ridiculous, frankly. Strawman, pay 500, special summon a banished Kozmo monster, but it's destroyed during the end phase, which is pretty decent. And then Soartroopers, pay 1,000 to special summon a psychic type Kozmo monster from the graveyard. Finally, for a couple more pilots, we're running 1 Kozmoll Wickedwitch and 1 Kozmoll Dark Lady. So Wickedwitch, you can pay 1,000, can't be destroyed by battle or card effects that turn, and Dark Lady is pay 1,000 in order to negate a monster effect that's not her own. So some pretty good utility there. And then onto the ships, we're running 3 Kozmo Dark Destroyer. This is kind of, you know, if Tincan's, you know, kind of your cornerstone, this is kind of like the pinnacle of where your deck's going, really. You really want to end up with Dark Destroyer, and you want to hit it multiple times. So if it's normal or special summoned, target 1 monster on the field and destroy it. Can't be targeted by card effects, and then all the ships have a thing where if they're destroyed, you can banish them from the graveyard in order to special summon a Kozmo monster that's lower than their level. So Dark Destroyer can special summon level 7 or lower. From there, we're running 2 Slipriders. So Sliprider can destroy a spell or trap card when it's summoned in a similar way to Dark Destroyer, and then again it's got the same special summon effect if it's destroyed, but for a level 4 or lower. It can be targeted unlike Dark Destroyer, but Dark Destroyer can't be targeted like Forerunner and like Dark Eclipser. So Forerunner's probably the worst if I've got to pick one. So it can't be targeted, which is great. And then during your standby phase, you gain 1,000 life points, but it doesn't do anything else apart from that. Dark Eclipser can't be targeted, and if your opponent activates a trap card, you can banish a Kozmo monster from your graveyard to negate and destroy. The thing with Dark Destroyer is that you add the monster that it floats into to your hand, which is obviously a bit worse than the special summoning, but I suppose they couldn't keep the chain going forever. So from there, we're running a couple of hand traps. I'm running 2 Effect Veiler, 3 Psy-Framegear Gamma, which I think Gamma's actually super solid because the tagging out, which is something that your opponent's probably going to be trying to negate, the banish. So you tag out by banishing your psychic type monster from the field, and then summon, but that banish is a cost, which means that it's off the field, so Psy-Framegear Gamma is live at that point, and then obviously the 1 driver to round up the monsters. Okay, and onto the spells. So we're running 3 Kozmotown in a garish premium gold foiling. So Kozmotown, it's an interesting card. I think it was probably better historically than it is now, but I still think it's a decent part of the deck. So it's got a couple of effects. So once per turn, you can target a banished Kozmo monster and return it to your hand, and then pay life points equal to its level times 100, which is pretty solid. And then you can reveal any number of Kozmo monsters in your hand, shuffle them into the deck, and draw cards equal to the number that you shuffled. So it's a great way of keeping resources. It does conflict a little bit with our Pot of Extravagance in terms of that draw effect. You're not really using your extra deck. You could run the new pot in order to try and search out, your tin can. I wouldn't begrudge anyone for doing that. I'm just not chucking $300 into a place out of that card until it gets the Mega Tin reprint. From there, I'm running a few one-offs, so some consistency boosters in Emergency Teleport, 1-for-1, and Monster Reborn. And then we've got some additional things. So Upstart Goblin, which you could argue conflicts with Pot of Extravagance as well, but I just think it's 39 card deck sort of thing. One Terraform to search that out, that Kozmotown, and the one called by the Grave. It's been a while since I've separated the traps into their own section. I mean, not that there's a huge amount here, but it feels like it's probably a worthwhile separation. So we've got 3 Dogmatica Punishment, and like Extravagance, the Cosmos really don't use the extra deck, so you can maximize your other uses for it, and Dogmatic Punishment is one of the best ways to do so, in my opinion. I think it's become fairly standard in Cosmo builds, if I had to say. So you target one face-up monster your opponent controls, send a monster from your extra deck with equal to or higher attack than that monster, and destroy that monster. You can't special summon from the extra deck after you've done this. And the cards that we're sending have, can have more utility being in the graveyard. From there, we're playing 2 Cosmojo. So this is target one Cosmo monster you control, destroy it, and if you do, banish one card your opponent controls, which is great because non-target banish, which is a good way of getting around, some problematic cards. And then finally, we're running 2 back to the front. So this is just a better way of cycling into our Dark Destroyers multiple times in a duel. Okay, and onto the extra deck. So again, this is kind of, even more of a template than I suppose, your standard deck profile stuff is, just because you can kind of run whatever you want. A lot of the time, most duels you will not be going into it. So we've got 3 Intis in 2 different rarities. Excellent, good job. So if it's sent to the graveyard, you can pop a card on the field, which is, a great way to get a double pop off that punishment. It also pops any card, which is, just got huge utility. From there, we're running 1 Wind Pegasus and 1 Omega. So Wind Pegasus, its main effect you're never going into because you can't get to it, but while it's in the graveyard, you can, and a card you control is destroyed, you can banish it and then shuffle 1 card from your opponent's field into the deck. It is a targeting effect, but it's still quite good because it means you can kind of set up something if your opponent doesn't have 2 cards on the field with punishment. Omega has a couple of uses. You can obviously get Gamma off on your turn quite a lot of the time, which means that Omega tends to be live. That ends up, basically giving you extra resources. So you can either use them for links or Omega. You can also use it with punishment should your opponent summon a quite high attack monster and you want to get rid of it. And it can also shuffle cards from your opponent's graveyard back into the deck with its kind of shuffle effect. So it's got many utilities, and I think it's worthy of a slot, especially with an extra deck that's so loose as this. From there, we're running a couple of XYZs. So we're running Cyber Dragon Nova. So it doesn't happen often, but 2 Slipriders can go into Nova, which goes into Infinity. It's better than them just chubbing around on board. From there, we're running a couple of rank 8, should I say. So we're running 1 Divine Dragon Knight Felgrand. I don't know why I had such trouble with that. And then 1 Hope Harbinger. So these are kind of if you've happened to get 2 Dark Destroyers on field and, your link options aren't, what you want them to be. Titanic Genealogy is a solid card, especially against kind of spell-heavy decks, and Felgrand is good at protecting himself and also disrupting your opponent. From there, we've got a few Link monsters. So we've got a couple of Link 1, so Link Karibo and Relinquish Anima. I think you definitely could cut the Link Karibo should you want to. Relinquished Anima is just for if your opponent is kind of forgets that it exists and you can just pinch a monster. There we've got a few Link 2s, so we've got 1 IP Masquerena, should you get the setup for it. And then finally a few Nightmares, which I suppose tend to come up the most often, I would say. So Nightmare Cerberus, Nightmare Phoenix, and one Nightmare Unicorn, which obviously goes hand in hand with the, the Masqueraders to try and get it off in your opponent's turn. So, concluding, unfortunately for Kozmo, there's been a whole trio of Star Wars films released since their inception. The cards have just aged, and that doesn't make the deck bad by any means, it just means it's never really going to be a meta contender. It's just a bit too slow. If you get set up, you can definitely grind out kind of advantage-based wins, but against an established board, there's really not enough force choking you can do to break through. So it's a maybe harsh 2 for the relevance. As for the fun factor, the deck is still pretty interesting in that kind of tag out, banish mechanic. And it's still pretty fresh for being, kind of 5 years old. But a lot of the duels can still come down to kind of like the same linear plays. So it's a 3 for the fun factor. This build of Kozmo is pretty expensive at about $300. I think there are definitely, more decks with, more bang for your buck, I suppose is the best way to put it. You can make this way more budget, as the main core of Kozmo is actually pretty cheap. So I think, by cutting extravagances and maybe some of the extra deck cards, you could definitely get a kind of budget-friendly alternative. So, is the Force still with Kozmo? Let me know, and thanks for watching.